This is Jennifer Gonzalez welcoming you to episode 31 of the Cult of Pedagogy podcast. In this episode, I'm going to talk about the incredible power in the classroom of being a dork. So this is going to be another episode that I am pulling from an old blog post that I feel is really important, but it was from one of the earlier months of my blog's existence, and I feel like it's an important message that I really want to get out there. So I'm going to be reading that to you and talking about it in just a minute. Before I do, I first wanted to welcome you and thank you so much if you have left me a review on iTunes. It's super important to the success of this podcast, and if you haven't done it yet, but you like what I'm doing here, I would so appreciate you just going to iTunes and leaving a quick review. Also, since this episode is going to be a little bit shorter than some of the others, I wanted to just take a minute to talk to you about my Teachers Pay Teacher store, which I haven't really mentioned on this show before. And if you are only a podcast listener, you may not know that I actually make things for teachers to use in their classrooms. So if you wanted to take a look at some of those things, how you would find it is to go to cultofpedagogy.com, and across the top menu, there is something called Teaching Materials. Now, if you click on that, which I'm going to do right now, I've got several categories of materials. The one that I am probably the most proud of is my book called The Teacher's Guide to Tech. And I wrote this a year ago, and I'm just getting ready to put out a new edition for 2016. But I created this, and it's a PDF. It's an ebook, but it's not like a Kindle ebook. It's a very, very big PDF. And the reason I created it was because I kept getting asked about tech tools, and I was starting to write blog posts about them, and I realized there's no way I'm ever going to be able to write about all the tools. And I was also meeting a lot of people who just seemed to have big gaps in their knowledge about things. Like if I would say I have a podcast, and they would look at me like, I don't want to admit that I don't know what a podcast is, so I'm just going to smile. And I was picking up tricks along the way, and I was learning about tools, and I was starting to feel like I was learning more than a lot of other people I knew. And I wanted to share it in a way that wasn't going to overwhelm people. And so initially I was just going to put together a list of tools and kind of just categorize them. And that just blossomed into this PDF. And what it is I have taken 100 different tools. It's going to expand into more later, but I have broken them into categories. And so there's a whole category, for example, of presentation tools. So one of them is PowerPoint, but then there are a few others that people may not have heard of, like Haiku Deck, Google Slides, and a few others. And so they're all grouped together, so you can say to yourself, all right, I know what PowerPoint is. Let's see what some of these other ones do. There's a section on blogging tools. What kinds of tools do people use to actually make a blog? How do you make a blog? There's a section on social media, and it's sort of, everybody knows what Facebook is, but I explain a little bit more about Twitter and Pinterest and Instagram, even Reddit, which is popular with some teenagers. But and I think some of these are just good for us to know what they are, and others, most of the tools in here, I explain how you can actually use these in your classroom. Most of the tools I talk about are free things, or they have a very good free option. And so each tool has its own page. I explain it in really clear, plain, basic language. And then I also provide a link to a video that demonstrates it in use, a link to the website that wherever that tool, their website is, and talk a little bit about whether there's a price associated with it. So the idea was to try to get everything all pulled together in one place so that if you hear about something, you can look it up and learn a little bit about it and decide if it's worth your time to really investigate. There's also a glossary of terms, a lot of terms that I've picked up over time. When I say them, I get blank stares from people, so I've defined those. And my favorite thing about this tech guide is that it's all cross-referenced, so it's very clickable. If I am in the table of contents and I want to learn about Digo, which is a great kind of a research tool, in the table of contents, I can click on it and I go to the Digo page directly. And then if I want to go back to the table of contents, there's a button like that. It works a lot like a website, but it's a PDF that just lives right on your desktop. And it works on iPads and everything. So that is one of the things that I sell in my Teachers Pay Teacher store. A couple of the other things, I've got a whole course teaching you and students how to use Google Docs, Google Slides, and Google Forms. I've got some really good icebreakers, really, really good ones. They've been very, very popular, and they're just basically PowerPoints, but you can use them to set them up in your classroom and have your kids play these icebreaker games that are just really fun and get kids talking. I have a set of student inventories where you can intake information about your students to get to know them better. Anyway, it's worth a look, and I'm going to continue adding things. I'm trying to build it slowly because I want every product in there to be thoughtful and well-researched and good quality. You just go to cultofpedagogy.com and click on teaching materials at the top, and that'll take you straight to a page that gives you a glimpse at each one of those. Okay, so the post that I am going to basically be reading to you today, but I will probably stop and offer commentary every once in a while. The original title of it was The Breathtaking, Life-Altering Power of Being a Dork. And this is actually advice I used to give to my pre-service teachers. When I would give them advice on becoming a teacher, I'd give them all kinds of different tips. Some things were very practical and some were more philosophical. And this was one that I would often say was an important aspect of a good teacher, is that you have to be the geek in the room. When you want students to do something that's sort of embarrassing, you have to go first. And that kind of lowers everybody else's inhibitions. You also have to be the geek about learning in general and be enthusiastic about what you're doing. And if you're too concerned about being really cool or being really professional, they are not likely to pick up any enthusiasm for learning from you. So I got to thinking about this and I decided to write a post on it. So I'm going to read it to you, and I may stop, but I may not. Well, here's oh, Lord, Jen. I'm going to start editing less so that you can hear all of my spazzy foibles. Okay. I have always loved the band Chicago. I used to love them because I heard their music so often on the radio when I was little, and because their songs comprised so much of the slow dance soundtrack at my school dances. But until one particular night in college, I never paid much attention to the horns. That night, I was playing cards and listening to music with Sean, a guy I had a crush on. Chicago's Feelin' Stronger Every Day came on. He turned it up. We kind of rocked in our seats the way people do when they're liking the music but feeling a little shy. Then, as the song progressed, things took an unexpected turn. Most guys I knew, when they were moved to really rock out to a song, would play air guitar, or maybe air drums, or they would sing, but not Sean. Sean was a trombone player. He played in, the orchestra at our college. We went to Penn State. So for Sean, when Chicago came on, he played air trombone. I laughed at first, thinking he was just goofing around, but he kept it up. So I let my cards rest in my lap, and I just watched him. He was enthralled. His eyes were closed, his trombone arm sliding back and forth in perfect time with the music, pure joy on his face. As the song sped toward its crescendo, I really heard for the first time those kick-ass horns. It was kind of breathtaking, and it forever changed the way I listened to Chicago. If Sean had played it cool, stifled his passion, and just bobbed his head like most people, I would have no memory of that moment, and I probably wouldn't appreciate the horn section the way I do now. I'm so grateful he didn't worry about looking like a dork. The next section of this post starts with a subtitle that says, "Cool is a waste of time," and there's a picture of me wearing a fedora at age 17 with some smoky eyeliner and a blazer like we wore in 1987, and looking very serious. Under the picture, I write this. This was me in high school around 1987. What I see in this picture, apart from a girl who desperately wants to be Lisa Bonet, who, if you don't know who that is, she was on The Cosby Show back before Bill Cosby had the reputation that he has now. Anyway, she was extremely cool. Extremely cool. What I see in this picture, apart from a girl who desperately wants to be Lisa Bonet, is a girl who desperately wants to be cool. I managed to pull it off sometimes, but now I wish I hadn't worked so hard at it. I think I missed out on some things. Sports, for one. It's hard to be an athlete when you're smoking cigarettes in the parking lot. Or maybe taking up a strange hobby, or making friends with some of the smarter, quieter kids. I might have really liked some of them, but I didn't bother. Looking back, I'm trying to recall what I hid, what my secret passion was. What was my horn section? Here's what makes me sad. I can't think of anything. I don't think I had anything like a horn section, even in private. I never bothered to explore the things that might have made me a little dorky. When you spend all your energy in the service of looking cool, what you ultimately do is erase yourself. I think I would have been better off if I had been more like this guy. And what's there is a picture of Rowley, who is a character on the Diary of a Wimpy Kid series. This is the guy from the movie. And he looks like a big dork in that picture. So you'll have to go to the post and see him. If you're familiar with the Diary of a Wimpy Kid movies, you know Rowley. Rowley is a dork in the best sense of the word. Not exactly a nerd. A nerd is super smart about one thing and maybe lacking in social skills. And not exactly a geek either. Geeks have achieved their own techie glory spot in the universe. Nowadays, when a person calls themselves a geek, they're basically bragging. No, Rowley is pure dork. Blithely unaware and unconcerned about other people's opinions of him. When he encounters something he likes, he is all in. Although Rowley's dorkiness tortures his best friend Greg, the main character, it usually ends up working in his favor. Few scenes illustrate this better than the one at a school dance where Rowley performs a choreographed number with his mom to the Beastie Boys song Intergalactic. Instead of this resulting in him becoming a social pariah, everyone cheers him on. He actually gets more popular. What would happen if we all started aiming for less Lisa Bonet and more Rowley? The last section is called How Dorking Out Can Change the World. Allowing yourself to quit worrying what other people think, to embrace your real passions without apology, can have an impact that stretches beyond anything you can measure. More specifically, number 1, being a dork teaches other people to love learning. Whenever you demonstrate a genuine passion for anything, the details of a sports car, unusual words in Japanese, the perfect blend of spices to rub on a steak, you model a love of learning. That's not something we often celebrate, even though it's one of the keys to happiness. To be able to feed your soul by developing a talent or pursuing a hobby is one of the healthiest things a person can do. It generally doesn't damage the body, it develops independence rather than codependence, and it gives you a reason to get out of bed. Finding and following a passion can replace a more damaging addiction. Most importantly, it can be a real source of joy. Some people are lucky enough to be born into families and communities where this kind of joy is everywhere. They have a father who never stops talking about his Civil War memorabilia, a mother who obsessively picks at her guitar, a neighbor who shows off the gorgeous beets he just pulled from his garden. In these environments, a person will naturally find and pursue their own passions. But others don't know anything like this. They're surrounded by people who pursue toxic addictions, who spend all their time and energy on work, or whose primary obsessions are texting and napping. If you think you don't belong in this second group, consider this. If you're publicly stifling your enthusiasm for the things you love, then from the outside, it might be hard to tell the difference. As a teacher, you're in a position to actively model this love of learning for your students. One way we do this is by treating the work like it's worthwhile. In his book, Choice Words: How Our Language Affects Children's Learning, Peter Johnston describes a teacher reading a book aloud to her students. She stops, rereads a sentence, and says, "Oh, I love that line." By demonstrating an emotional response to the text, this teacher powerfully impacts her students. She shows them what loving good writing looks like, taking the work beyond the classroom and into the real world of rich human experience. Number 2, being a dork frees the dork in others. Consider a party buffet, a table laid out with delicious-looking food ready for the taking. In a room of well-behaved adults, what usually happens to that buffet? For far too long, it sits untouched, because no one wants to be the first to walk over and eat a piece of quiche. Once somebody finally does, it's all over for that buffet, but someone has to go first. By being brave, you make other people brave too. This principle works in lots of situations. Admitting you don't know something, asking the stupid question in a class, being the first one to say hello when passing someone in a public place, saying you liked a movie that everyone else is making fun of. The chances are very good that you're not the only one. If you can get over your fear of looking foolish, you can actually change the direction of things, and when you do, others will follow. In our classrooms, we ask students to be brave all the time. We want them to read aloud, give presentations, participate actively in groups, all under the critical eye of their peers. If we expect them to take on these tasks with any kind of gusto, we have to go first. And we have to really overdo it, putting ourselves out there in ways we might not in front of our own peers to lighten the mood, dissipate the nerves, and show them that a little embarrassment won't kill you. Number 3, being a dork puts a dent in the status quo. The world only becomes more interesting when brave people put themselves out there. Consider the art, the music, the science, the social justice movements that would be wiped from our history if everyone just wanted to blend in. By being something other than ordinary, something less than cool, you reshape the world for everyone around you. So keep on being responsible. Pay your bills and wear clothes and do your best to spell correctly and follow traffic laws, but let your quirks out too. You'll help break down stereotypes and expose people to new ideas. It's not uncommon for football players to take ballet to improve their performance, but many people credit Lynn Swann with making it more acceptable to do it. Every major invention we enjoy today comes from the work of someone whose friends kept telling them to get a life. And who could have predicted that 2014 would find George W. Bush among the hottest new painters? His paintings are not bad. You are not right now everything you could become. And if you let the other sides of you emerge, the rest of us will be better for it. My crush for Sean never really developed into anything. He stopped calling after a while, and I never knew why. It has taken more than 20 years for me to realize that one very distinct possibility is that I bored him. I was kind of a cool chick who was fun to have around at a party and not much more. For someone like Sean, who had already found his passion, I was probably a real snooze. And in some situations, I know I still am. Embracing your dorkiness takes practice. It takes listening for your own particular horn section, waiting for those moments when you start to feel a little bit embarrassed. That feeling is the universe telling you to pay attention. It's joy knocking at your door. Let it in, dork. To read a written version of this post, visit cultofpedagogy.com, click podcast, and choose episode 31. To get a weekly email from me about my newest blog posts, podcast episodes, and products, sign up for my mailing list at cultofpedagogy.com/subscribe. Thanks so much for listening and have a great day.